Comprehensive manga. Starting from a jobless reincarnation introduction. www.zhaozuiyuan.com Lin Fan has traveled and arrived in the world of jobless reincarnation. Good news. He stole the wool of the Lord God. Bad news. He was blacklisted by the Lord God, so he began his journey to the heavens and worlds. World. Empowered reincarnation, sword god domain, seeking encounters in dungeons. Is something wrong? Offering blessings for a better world, Dragon Clan, https://www.zhaozuiyan.com. Chapter 1. Preface. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, it's night. The distant lights flicker. The gentle breeze at night blew the boy, who calmly looked at the moon in the distance. The hazy moonlight shone down, adding a touch of moonlight to the street in front of the young man. He took out his phone with some sadness. The phone was just bought a while ago, but at this moment, two clear small words were jumping on the screen. Do you want to understand the meaning of life? Do you want to truly live? Yes/yes. The young man's name is Lin Fan, who is 18 years old and from the Heavenly Dynasty. He has just completed the college entrance examination and is waiting for the admission notice. Although his family is mineral-free, he is still considered a well-off family. His parents are still alive, and although he always goes out to work, his life is still relatively good. In summary, he feels that things are going well now. He doesn't want to understand the meaning of life and doesn't want to become the minion of the main god. But now these two options really make him laugh or cry. He himself enjoys surfing the internet, and at some point, these two sentences have already been played to pieces on the Chinese website. He had also fantasized about such a scene, but felt hesitant when it was truly presented to reality. Lin Fan also suspected that it was a virus sent by a hacker, so he waited for the second child to be diagnosed, so that he could package the WeChat bank card of the second child and take it away. After hesitating multiple times, I finally didn't click on it. No matter how you look at it, dots are always good. Then, this phone has been on since last night and thanks to it, Lin Fan has not used it for a whole day. He tried to get someone else's phone, and then he found that the screen that was originally on went black, and these two lines of text appeared again. Lin Fan was lost in thought. He pondered silently. He has no clue. Returning to this question once again. Is it important? It feels like something bad can happen if you click on it. After all, these two options, one is yes and the other is yes, just like signing a sales contract. He walked on the quiet night street, lost in thought. Just in the next moment, he won't have to worry anymore. A portal from another world rushed towards him at a very fast speed, and he hardly reacted. The huge inertia and impact shattered the scene, accompanied by the sound of metal scraping and tearing, and Lin Fan flew out like a broken kite. The intense pain came almost instantly, and his consciousness was overwhelmed by the pain. Then he lost consciousness. Lin Fan didn't even know where this car came from. It seemed to have appeared out of thin air, and according to reason, such a fast speed should be quite harsh on such a quiet night. But he didn't hear any sound, and the car seemed to suddenly emerge from the side. When Lin Fan opened his eyes again, it was a vast white world. He looked around in confusion, surrounded by a gray-white mist, hazy and unable to see clearly. Feeling the body with all four limbs still alive, without the tragic experience of just being in a car accident, Lin Fan tried to take a step forward, his feet touching the vast white world, causing ripples to rise in the white world. Lin Fan frowned and pondered. Unless unexpected, he should have died. It's really strange. First of all, that paragraph, this time I'm driving directly to pick up someone. Are there so many ways to travel in this world today? And I'm afraid he won't agree, is there still any performance in the current time travel business? What should we do now? He tried to speak with his mouth open, but found that he couldn't make a sound at all. To be precise, he spoke without any sound coming out. It's like this region is a vacuum zone. He looked around in confusion and waited for a while, but still no main deity or goddess of wisdom who claimed to be Akuya appeared. He felt a bit annoyed. Lin Fan secretly roast. You forced people to come here, and as a result, there was not even a person who claimed to be an elder. So, he simply walked aimlessly. The vast and boundless white world has no end in sight. In the vast white world, only this young man is walking alone. There is no one else, only oneself. I don't know how far I've walked, I don't know how far I've walked. Finally, when a hint of loneliness began to spread in the depths of the boy's heart, loneliness turned into fear and struck his heart. From initially looking around, to now being silent, he just walked calmly. The journey is long and lifeless, with no sound or vitality to hear or see. There is no color, everywhere is a vast expanse of white, only silence. What is this? Lin Fan wore a bitter smile at the corner of his mouth. Man, he has come, but there is no main god, leaving him only this vast white world. He is a bit tired and weak. He wants to sit down and rest for a while. So Lin Fan sat on the ground, and the vast white world rippled once again. He began to look up at the world around him. The vast white world, without color or temperature, is just a vast white world. This vast white world is like a scroll waiting for the painter to sprinkle ink, or like a brand new book waiting for the author to write. Lin Fan's mind inexplicably came up with a bold idea. There is no main god, and there is no goddess in the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com. Perhaps he is a writer in this world. He began to recall the quiet night before being hit by a car. Night shrouded the entire city, bright neon lights flickering in the darkness. The number of pedestrians on the street is decreasing, with only a few drunken men walking unsteadily. The night breeze gently brushed the leaves, making a rustling sound as if whispering something. The high-rise buildings in the distance are brightly lit, like a huge castle standing in the darkness. The shops on both sides of the street have been closed, and only a few night snack shops are still open. A tempting aroma wafts from the store, making people drool. Suddenly, a cat slipped out of the street corner and quietly walked towards the trash can. It sniffed and then extended its tongue to lick, making a sizzling sound. A dog not far away also started barking, breaking the peaceful night. He walked in this dark city like this. The stars in the sky twinkled, like countless diamonds dotted on the black sky. The moon also revealed half of its face, emitting a soft glow. A nightingale sang in the distance, its crisp voice echoing in the air. The city under the night sky seems to be a mysterious world full of unknowns and imagination. It makes Lin Fan feel relaxed and happy, and also makes him feel lonely and lonely. The world began to change, and the once white world turned upside down. Lin Fan looked up and saw that the sky was no longer a vast white world, but a pitch-black night. The bright moonlight shone with silver, and the streets became lively. A black and white cat appeared in front of him, and scenes quickly spread around with Lin Fan as the center. Lin Fan stood here, standing quietly. The sense of loneliness disappears, the fear of the unknown dissipates, and is replaced by a strong sense of novelty. Chapter 2 begins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Lin Fan began to unleash his imagination, painting magnificent scrolls one by one. The boundless ocean, rolling with waves, seems to devour everything. The starry night sky, like Van Gogh's Starry Sky, showcases the depth of the universe. The towering Mount Everest, towering from the sky to the earth, exudes a solemn and serene beauty. Lin Fan transformed the world in his heart into vivid images. The world in his writings, from the delicate depictions of flowers, plants, and trees to the majestic grandeur of rivers, mountains, and rivers, all make people marvel at the wonder and beauty of nature. Even tiny mosquitoes are lifelike. The vast and boundless ocean, the starry night sky, and the pristine snow-capped mountains leading straight to the sky. He is like a quick-witted painter, selflessly painting one world after another. From rivers, mountains and rivers, to the universe, from flowers and plants to trees and mosquitoes. It can be hazy or meticulous. As long as he wants, everything can be presented. Everything is like a dream, but it's all real. He is the master of this world at this moment, and this world is his consciousness at this moment. His thinking began to gradually diverge, and perhaps he himself did not expect that his consciousness would gradually merge with this world. His spiritual power began to gradually expand, and as time passed, it grew stronger and his soul became more pure. This world blended with Lin Fan, and his spirit blended seamlessly with the world, without distinguishing between them. Every time he depicts a world, his spirit becomes even purer. Quickly, his soul reached a state of immaturity. After all the inspiration evaporated, he began to embellish the world. And his predecessor, Azai, inexplicably thought of anime. Lin Fan thought of Ram Ram, thought of Loki, thought of Alice, thought of birds swimming in 6 flowers, thought of many, many. He thought, perhaps he could turn these characters into reality. However, at this moment, the world did not respond. Seems to have fallen into silent silence. Lin Fan was puzzled. He scratched his head, and the dream of turning the anime wife into reality was just around the corner. How could he give up easily? He began to imagine the details of his anime wife in more detail, starting with the clothes. Let's all wear maid clothes. The white silk stockings always give people a pure and flawless beauty. The black and white maid clothes are even more inexplicable. He likes this kind of dress. He loves by sea. Just no response. Lin Fan was puzzled and looked around in confusion. The surroundings began to fade, not only because my wife didn't think it out, but also because they began to fall apart. In a flash, everything turns into nothingness and foam. Then he saw a sphere of light hidden in the vast white world. The light sphere is hidden deep, and who could have imagined that there is still a sphere under this vast white world? The light sphere emits a blue glow, soft and not dazzling. Lin Fan vaguely guessed its identity, so it should be the main god light ball, right? He was a bit curious and tried to move forward. He wanted to get closer to the light ball. Just like stepping in place, no matter how he walks, he can't get close to it. Lin Fan furrowed his brow, and the shattered world began to struggle. The invisible rules were repaired, and the distance between Lin Fan and the white light ball began to narrow. Quickly, he walked up to the light sphere. Lin Fan reached out and tried to touch the light ball. The next moment, a cold reminder sounded in Lin Fan's mind. System loading. Scan host identity. Determine as intruder, scan failed due to unknown impact, try again, please wait, scan failed, start binding host, binding failed rebind host binding failed. In this way, Lin Fan's mind kept repeating these two indifferent electronic synthesized sounds, just like a repeating machine repeating them almost 100 times. Just as Lin Fan yawned, the indifferent electronic sound was no longer these two sounds. Identify player as intruder, start erasing. Lin Fan suddenly gave a jolt, and the world began to flip. A huge eye opened in the shattered world. There was no emotion in his eyes, just silently staring at Lin Fan. Behind the ferocious eyeballs, there were occasional cries of sadness and grief. Lin Fan met his huge eyes and instinctively blinked. A strong palpitations hit his heart, but the imagined pain did not come, nor did it suddenly lead to a sudden death. All he had was deep calmness. After looking at Lin Fan for a moment, the eye slowly closed in the end. Erase. Failed. The originally indifferent voice of the system seemed to stir up ripples. Lin Fan blinked. He wanted to laugh a bit, but couldn't bring himself to laugh. Silence. One person and one system remained silent. Finally, the cold voice echoed back in the boy's mind. System activation successful, your ID is 000, attention, you have been blacklisted by the main god on zhaozuiyuan.com. Your current permission is at #UN%, detect that the host is in a soul state and has started searching for the world for the host, search successful, your initial talent is s.gradescale.freebody, Phase 1, Introduction. As you go through unknown changes, your soul is baptized by the world. As a lucky host, your soul has reached a state of immaturity. Effect. The initial talent is the maximum limit, permission is EX. This reincarnation will initiate 2 talent draws for you, note. A. Level talent is 0.01%, B. Level talent is 1%, C. Level talent is 10%, D. Level talent is 20%, E. Level talent is 68.99%, your permission is EX, this draw requires 1 A. Level and 1 B. Level talent each. A. Level Fool, Stage 1, Introduction. Fools wear colorful clothing, ignoring the cliff ahead, and walk forward with their heads held high. The little white dog at his feet was barking wildly, as if reminding him to pull back from the cliff. But the fool still maintained a joyful expression, looking towards the distant sky instead of the cliff in front of him, acting instinctively. The fool holds a white rose in his left hand, symbolizing purity and passion. Tie the bundle with a stick in your right hand. That stick is not an ordinary stick, it is a token, symbolizing strength. But besides fools, who would hold a token symbolizing power and tie a bundle significantly increased the upper limit of mental power. B. Level greed, significantly improved combat experience acquisition, delivery has been enabled for you, a large amount of information flooded Lin Fan's mind. Before Lin Fan could fully comprehend the information provided by the system, his eyes darkened and his consciousness gradually became dull. Chapter 3. Reincarnations. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Lin Fan felt his consciousness constantly being pulled, as if someone was rubbing him. When he regained his senses and struggled to open his eyes, he was startled by a sudden approaching face. Almost subconsciously, Lin Fan gave that handsome face a fierce attack. The handsome blonde let out a painful cry, covered his eyes, and began to thump on the ground. It is obvious that this old man was injured quite a bit. Lin Fan began to look at the young man rolling on the ground. This is a tall and handsome young man with short brown hair and dark blue eyes. His figure is very robust, with obvious muscle lines, but not too thick. He was wearing simple clothes, a white shirt, and black pants, but he looked very clean and tidy. Just for now, it seems like he has made a small mistake. When he realized it, Lin Fan blinked innocently. He wants to say, "You came here by yourself. Paul, are you okay?" A gentle female voice came from beside him, and Paul weakly covered his eyes, whispering, "It's okay. It looks like our child is very energetic." Paul stood up and looked at Lin Fan with a pair of slightly red and swollen eyes, his handsome face squeezed out a slightly ugly smile. Lin Fan looked at his appearance again and finally recognized him as Paul Graylat. I looked at the young blonde girl lying in bed, who looked very similar to Tsunade's appearance. Her soft golden hair was scattered around her waist, and her face was delicate and beautiful. Her facial features were distinct, and a pair of emerald green eyes couldn't hide her fatigue. She was tall and slender, with a beautiful figure, emitting a noble and elegant atmosphere. She is undoubtedly Senise Graylat. Extending his meaty little hand, Lin Fan felt his slightly frail body. In that moment, he realized that he had reincarnated without any accidents. But he still felt a bit confused. What was he crossing over to Ludius? And in the next moment, Paul's voice dispelled his doubts. "So let's call you Roya Graylat." That's what Paul said. Lin Fan, oh no, Luoya blinked and looked at Paul, who was clearly still a young man. His handsome face remained childish, and Paul's eyebrows were slightly raised. His emerald green eyes always revealed a sharp gaze, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. This was a manifestation of the young man's arrogance. Roya looked around and saw a red-haired girl wearing glasses next to her. Lilia, Paul's junior sister. At this time, she served as a maid in Paul's family. Lilia kept looking at the baby in swaddling clothes in front of her. The baby in front of her was very cute, with chubby cheeks and rustling yellow hair on her head. However, his pupils were golden, different from the green eyes of Paul and Serenus. His golden pupils were pure and clear, like a clear spring, but inexplicably made her feel a little uncomfortable. Almost subconsciously, she thought the baby in front of her was abnormal. Roya's gaze intertwined with Lilia. The golden eyes made her feel a bit dazed, as if they could see through the heart, making people feel warm and comfortable. Lilia blinked. For some reason, she couldn't develop any disgust towards the baby in front of her. Roya averted her gaze and looked around again, but did not see any other figures. They were the only 4 in the vast home. Is it like this? Did you not cross into Ludius yourself? Moreover, judging from the current situation, it seems that I have traveled through a world a bit early, and it seems that Ludius has not yet been born. It's really inexplicable. This couple is a slow couple, and they were not surprised why their newborn child was so calm. Paul carefully picked up Roya and walked up to Senis. He carefully placed Roya in Senis' arms. Her delicate and beautiful face showed a hint of a smile, and it must be said that Senis is an extremely outstanding woman. Even Roya couldn't help but lose his composure. It can only be said that even the cabbage has been hogged. Paul touched Roya's chubby cheek and said, "It's time to call Mom." Roya was slightly stunned, and when he realized it, he tried to speak, and a few babbling sounds came out. Paul and Senis exchanged a smile, showing a pleased expression. "Okay, that's it." Roya silently looked up at the ceiling. "After all, it's just an irresistible force. Forgive me." 2 years passed in the blink of an eye, and a 2-year-old child with golden hair and golden eyes lay in his room. I don't know why, but his hair grows very quickly, reaching waist length at the age of only 2. And Roya found that she seemed to be getting crooked as she grew older. Looking at himself in the mirror, he silently sighed. In the mirror, a pink and cute little one looked at Roya too playfully. With golden eyes, a delicate doll-like face, long hair draped over his shoulders, and wearing the same outfit as him, Roya smiled and she also smiled. Roya turned her head, and she also turned her head. Is it a man? Although it is not easy to distinguish features based on age, the appearance is indeed too feminine. Silently took out his weapon and breathed a sigh of relief. Is this kind of self really good? Roya's room was not big, but it was all 5 dirty. There was a thick magic book on the table that he asked for from Senis. When he was first born, Paul and Senis were very interested in the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com. However, not long after, Paul and Senis enthusiastically went to make a person and left Roya on the side. Sure enough, children are just accessories of love. Roya sighed. The soft bedding and little Zhengtai's face were in intimate contact, and the warmth on the blanket was transmitted to Roya's heart, but his heart was cold and uplifted. Today, although I am a mother, I have a strong male heart. And what will happen in the future if it's still small? He silently clicked on something resembling a floating ball in the lower right corner of his field of view, and a transparent panel appeared in front of him. The panel is very simple, with only 3 functions. Character properties, world capture, system mall. However, all the items in the system mall are grayish-white and he cannot purchase them. It can be seen that the main deity is really angry, and shopping permissions are no longer open. The only fortunate thing is that during my reincarnation, I ruthlessly drained the wool of the system. After looking at the system interface with a wide variety of products, he saw his talent as a fool in the 3rd column of the first page. And its selling price is 100 million points S. Level purchase permission *3. I looked at another B. Level talent, greed, and its price is also expensive. It also requires up to 100,000 points and 2A. Level purchasing privileges. Although he doesn't have much concept about points and purchasing privileges, when he thinks of the ugly face of capitalists, he estimates that this may be a number that a system worker could never achieve in his lifetime. So, he became a life winner directly this time, pulling the wool from the system until the system vomited blood. Chapter 4. Roya Graylat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, open your own property panel, where the transparent panel prominently reads, Characters, Roya Graylat, Age. 2, Strength. G, Agility. G, Stamina. G, Intelligence. D, Talent. Unclean Body, Stage 1, Fool, Stage 1, Greed, Skills. Intermediate Magic Knowledge, Swordsmanship, Beginner, Evaluation. You have extremely high growth talents, but now, apart from magic, you are useless. Roya opened the interface captured by the world and a small line of text appeared in front of her. Power of time and space. 50 out of 100, unable to capture the world, the most crucial function is the world capture function. According to the system instructions, the system will divide his soul into a small segment and take the form of a stowaway to another world. When he completes related tasks or significantly changes the world line in that world, the system will start stealing the original power of that world and feed back to the system. If he does well, he can quickly open the next world. In the main God space system, their minions will be given the names of points and exchange permissions. But for Roya, he can reclaim his soul and choose a few powers of his own in that world based on the situation. He doesn't know the specific operating space. After all, he hasn't started his first world capture yet. The power of time and space naturally grows slowly, but at an unusually slow speed. It took 2 years for this thing to grow less than 100. In this world, magic includes healing magic, attacking magic, and summoning magic. Ranks are divided into primary, intermediate, superior, holy, king, emperor, and divine levels in order. There are 2 ways to activate it. Singing and magic formation. When the attack magic reaches a certain level, one can hold titles such as Saint-level magician or Emperor-level magician. There are 3 mainstream swordsmanship schools, namely Sword God Flow, Water God Flow, and North God Flow. The common name for the founder of each school is to add gods after the names of each school. The level is also divided into 7 levels: Junior, Intermediate, Superior, Holy, King, Emperor, and Divine. Although I have a very high talent for magic, I am limited by books and have stopped at intermediate level magic. Magic is a magical thing with strong plasticity, guiding the magic within the body and then transforming it into various powers through fixed chance. It can be wind, fire, soil, or divine healing power. In short, magic is the source of all magic, just like the engine of a car. Roya's talent is very good, and even demons cannot express his abnormality. Never forget what you read, you will learn it as soon as you learn. He learned to walk at 2 months, could say simple words at 4 months, and read magic books alone at 6 months under Lilia's shocked face and Paul and his wife's happy smile. In short, Roya has an extremely abnormal learning ability. But unfortunately, this somewhat immature Zhengtai face is a facial paralysis for some reason. It's not that Roya's inner world is not rich enough, on the contrary, his inner world is full of drama, but for some reason, his face always has a calm and carefree expression. It was that kind of cold expression, or even though he was happy and wanted to smile, there was a hint of coldness at the corner of his mouth, which made the Paul couple think that something was bothering him. After spending time together, I realized that this was actually his expression of joy, not a sneer. The face with blonde hair and golden eyes was paralyzed and full of killing power. Although Roya did not excessively conceal herself and showed her precocious side from an early age, many things were done alone. However, the slow Paul couple did not doubt their son at all and were once proud of their child's talent. Roya did not let the foolish Paul couple worry, and at this stage, the main focus is on training in magic. Release magic, consume all magic, and then the capacity of this body can be increased by 1 point. Roya's body has an unexpectedly large capacity for magic. At the beginning of learning magic, even though he was a beginner, he had to release several intermediate spells to fully exploit the magic in his body. But as the number of containers in his body increased, over time, intermediate magic could no longer meet his consumption. So he began to ponder blindly. Now he is trying a novel technique. He named it the magic sword. Everyone's body magic is different, each with its own characteristics, and the amount required to transform different characteristics into magic release is also different. In short, there is also a gap between magical powers, which is the difference in quality. Then Roya realized that her magical power was surprisingly high in quality, albeit somewhat eerie. How to put it, logically magic cannot be presented alone, it can only be used as fuel to release magic. But he is different. His magic is very eerie and can appear directly in the form of magic. He also has strong destructive power and plasticity. If it only appears in a magical way, although the killing power will be greatly increased, the consumption will also be greatly increased at the same time. And the magic sword is a magic developed by him based on the principle of his own magic. Roya flipped his wrist and a pitch-black dagger appeared in his soft, white and tender hand. The pitch-black dagger is entirely composed of Roya's pitch-black magic, with pitch-black patterns on its surface, and its destructive power is full. According to the magic rules of this world, the damage of a complete body magic sword can be ranked as a king-level magic. The more advanced the magic, the more time it takes, and the more stringent the conditions that trigger it, resulting in longer preparation time for the caster. Although it can be instantly cast like Ludius, it is only for low-level magic. If high-level magic wants to cast it, it still needs to recite the spell that has been prepared for a long time. And it's also related to the surrounding environment. But the magic sword is different, it is instantaneous. As long as magic can keep up, it can theoretically destroy a town in an instant. It's the kind of instant where everything turns into nothingness. Extreme destructive power. After playing with the magic sword in his hand for about an hour, Roya finally emptied the magic from his body. His powerful spiritual power did not make him unconscious, he just lazily yawned, feeling a bit mentally drained. With a sigh, he walked towards the door. Lilia, a well-built maid, is doing household chores in the living room. Paul has been accompanying Denise lately. Denise has been in a bad state lately, and it is evident that she will soon have another child. It would be very troublesome for a large family to rely solely on Lilia to clean. Chapter 5. Ludius. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push anyway, being idle is also being idle. My skeletal body has not yet developed to the point of wielding a sword, and there is nothing else to do except to squander some magic. It's better to brush off the favor of the maid in front of me. Roya yawned and snatched a cloth from Lilia's hand, helping her wipe away the stains on the table. Lilia glanced at the cold and proud little Zhengtai, leaned down slightly, and said, "Hello, Miss Roya." This is Lilia's verbal retaliation for Roya's behavior just now. Roya's movements stiffened as she slammed heavily onto the table. Her indifferent and childish expression finally changed, and Roya shouted, "Call me young Master Roya." The morning sun shone on his delicate and lovely little face, a child like a doll. His clear eyes were like a quiet pool in the deep mountains of summer, and the clear mountains and waters flowed down his gaze. If it's someone they don't know, they will definitely think that the doll in front of them is angry. Only those who have been with them for a long time will know that indifference is like a gentle and kind heart hidden beneath the surface of an iceberg. The slightly raised eyebrows indicate that Roya is not angry. When he is angry, his eyebrows always rise, and his eyes are no longer cold and indifferent. Looking at the kind yet proud 2-year-old child in front of her, Lilia's heart was filled with a mix of flavors. This child is completely different from Paul. I thought Paul's child would inherit his promiscuity and lust to some extent, but this person in front of me always thinks for others unintentionally and does things in a strict manner. When Roya could walk, he always unintentionally helped her. After wiping the table with some effort, he looked at Lilia and asked, "Lilia, how did you get to know your father?" Lilia was a bit silent, her golden and smooth hair falling off Roya's shoulders with her movements. She could smell the unique scent of the child's body, which was the unknown fragrance of flowers, quiet and elegant, refreshing and refreshing. "Probably when I was learning swordsmanship, I was his junior sister at that time," Lilia said, "and when it comes to Paul, her expression always becomes very complicated." Roya said confidently, "Indeed, Paul always makes people uneasy." Lilia glanced at this guy who was neither big nor small. Although the child always called him father in front of Paul, he would only call him by his name in private. It's very impolite, but Lilia can tell that he has no ill intentions. Lilia took a new cloth and soaked it in a wooden bucket. She skillfully began preparing to wipe the floor. Seeing that Lilia was not ready to take on the conversation, Roya spoke again, "Do you think you were born a boy or a girl?" Lilia thought for a moment and said, "I hope it's a girl, so there's one man and one woman." Then they fell into silence again. After tidying up everything in the living room, Roya wiped away the slight sweat on his forehead and waved to Lilia before returning to the room. Lying lazily in bed, he began to think about how to face Ludius. Time flies in the blink of an eye. Autumn is a beautiful season, with blue skies and white clouds intertwined outside, and a gentle breeze blowing over the golden rice ears, bringing an unnamed fragrance of flowers. The sunshine is bright, everything is so beautiful. Today is undoubtedly a joyful day. Without him, Thanes has given birth again. Unexpectedly, a yellow-haired little ghost was born, and Loya even leaned in to take a look. A yellow-haired baby with a big head and a chubby body, the newborn looked around blankly, and his expression was just like that of the world he had just been reincarnated into. Although they have a big heart, they also realize that something is not right. Paul and Sanis remained silent one after another, feeling a bit silent. Why do they have two children in a row like this? If Roya knew their thoughts, she would definitely say that the two sons you gave birth to are reincarnations. However, the joy of the safe birth of the child still outweighed the slightest sense of unease. Paul happily leaned his face towards him, only recalling his experiences 2 years ago and silently retreating. Paul widened his eyes as he looked at the baby in swaddling clothes, his emerald green eyes shining brightly. He was very healthy. This is what Paul said to Senis. Paul placed Ludius into Sanis's arms, and a hint of tenderness appeared in his eyes. Loya stood beside, watching the warm scene, her beautiful eyebrows furrowing slightly. Ludius Graylat. The protagonist in the original work, although said to be the protagonist, is not actually smooth sailing. In his past life, he was a Neth tribe, and after crossing over, he was still manipulated by gods and humans. To be honest, Roa had no good feelings for his senses. This is a somewhat cowardly person, although he successfully changed his flaws step by step, Roya still has a bad impression of him. The novel of jobless reincarnation is very realistic. No one is born perfect, even when traveling to a different world, it is impossible not to leave regrets. However, he did not finish watching all of the films, he only watched 2 of them and was not too familiar with the subsequent plot. But since he has come to this world and has traveled through time to become the elder brother of Ludius, let's give him a better ending. Transfer events, demon continent, human god, dragon god, and other vocabulary gathered together, and without realizing it, Roya's brow furrowed even tighter. In theory, he should be going to crush the conspiracy of the human god, work with the dragon god, find the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com, and achieve a happy ending. But if we defeat the dragon god, can we obtain a large amount of time and space power? Can we defeat the dragon god first and then let him be our lackey subordinate, then kill the gods and humans, and finally achieve a happy ending? So the question is, can he beat the dragon god? The strongest person in this world. He silently looked at his talent. The unscripted body. Fools, greedy. Maybe we can give it a try. But it's definitely not possible at the moment. Going up is like giving away a person's head. Just as Roya was lost in thought, the wailing sound of Ludius came from beside him. He glanced at Ludius, who was happily approaching to drink milk. Roya pursed his lips and secretly despised the Nit tribe in his heart. Not like him, he has a strong sense of personal integrity. Except for the first forced feeding, he always drinks milk from a bottle. Looking at the guy in front of him who felt at ease, he silently sighed. It's all his damn integrity that's to blame. After eating and drinking enough, the freshness of close contact with Europa gradually faded away, and Ludius turned his gaze to his 2-year-old child who had been standing quietly beside him. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and a beautiful pink and golden-haired little Jingtai stood on the side. Her cute and tender faces, along with her smooth golden long hair at the waist, and her delicate features resembling a doll's face made Ludius' heart skip a beat. Just at a glance, he had the idea of making Xiao Jingtai in front of him his own child bride. Just when he saw the expression on Loya's face, he swallowed his saliva. That was a pair of very indifferent eyes, with golden pupils reflecting on oneself lying in bed. The doll-like face had no expression, looking at him with a miscellaneous, indifferent expression. Chapter 6. Stealing fat times is wrong. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Ludius suddenly felt a little scared and looked at his silly father beside him, then at his mother sitting quietly. He really wants to say that your child seems to want to kill me. But Paul seemed to remember something and grabbed the impatient Roya in front of Ludius. He smiled and said, "You should get along well." 2 pairs of eyes met, and a pair of cold, golden pupils made Ludius almost instinctively look away. To be honest, at this moment, he was afraid. Paul noticed a somewhat eerie atmosphere between the two, so he tapped Roa's forehead and said solemnly, "You should get along well, especially you, Roa. As the eldest brother, you should let your younger brother do more." Roa sighed and nodded helplessly. Seeing his son's expression, Paul smiled and didn't care whether Ludius understood or not. Paul said to Ludius, "Don't look at your big brother like this, he is actually a gentle person." Then Paul made a face, as if trying to make Ludius happy. However, Ludius couldn't laugh at all. After playing with Ludius for a while, Paul breathed a sigh of relief as he watched the little baby gradually calm down. After he put Ludius back in the crib, he began to stick with Sanus, leaving Loya and Lilith to take care of Ludius. Ludius half squinted his eyes, pretending to be asleep, but in fact, he had been secretly scrutinizing the child in front of him. Although she is a rare beauty embryo, there is almost no expression on her face. Those indifferent eyes showed no emotion at all, and almost instantly, he remembered the group of classmates who had bullied him in his past life. Due to his predecessor, Ludius was extremely afraid of strangers. In his eyes, Roya's immature face began to twist and overlap, becoming people who had bullied him in their past lives. They seemed to be looking at him with such eyes, right? He was both scared and panicked. Will the nominal family in front of him bully him like those in their past lives? He didn't know, but fear turned into a wave that swept through his body. Unconsciously, he began to curl up, just like in his previous life. Just as Ludius was suspicious, the 2-year-old child approached his bed and brought a chair, standing up directly. Suddenly, Ludius's face turned pale, his already pale little face losing its color, and his body began to tremble. He told himself time and time again that everything had changed, everything had started over again, but his spiritual fear made it impossible for him to distinguish reality. Roya naturally saw this scene as well. Looking at the baby in front of him, who was pretending to be calm and trembling, he curled up as if there was something terrifying outside. Roya sighed. Although he looked down upon Ludius from his past life, he was ultimately a pitiful person. He reached out to touch the chubby white face. Ludius saw the hand getting closer and closer, and couldn't help but tremble in his heart. Memories of campus violence in his past life began to surge wildly, and fear turned into a pitch-black hand gripping his neck, making it almost impossible for him to breathe. Tears began to swirl in his eyes, disheartened. Just the next moment, a tender white finger pinched Ludius's cheek. The imagined suffocation and pain did not strike, and the smooth and tender fingers came from the face. The warm and cold touch stunned Ludius. He suddenly opened his eyes wide, and without realizing it, tears had already flowed from his eyes. Roya naturally felt the abnormality of Ludius, and he felt amused. If it were Paul, no matter how slow he was, he would still have noticed his abnormality. Fortunately, he met him. Sighed, why bother the traveler? Roya pretended not to see anything unusual about him. Roya's fingers gently brushed against Ludius's forehead, and a childish voice came from the nominal big brother in front of him. You will be my younger brother from now on, I will protect you. That's what Roya said. The voice seemed familiar, distant and close. It was gentle, and although the speaker didn't use much force, the sentence was so clear. Of course, Ludius couldn't understand the meaning of this sentence. After all, he had just arrived in this world. However, this sentence inexplicably made his heart tremble. His eyes were moist again, tears flowed down his face. At this moment, his heart was so fragile, and he was so sad. He hurriedly reached out his hand, trying to instinctively wipe away his tears. Suddenly, he remembered that he was a baby and began to try to cover up his abnormality. He opened his mouth and cried loudly, using his crying voice to cover up the tears in his eyes. It used to be installed, but now it's real. Roya was speechless, and soon Paul's footsteps could be heard outside. He looked at Roya standing on the chair, and then at Ludius lying in the stroller crying loudly. He approached and asked, "What's wrong?" Roya still had a cold expression on his face, and he said, "Maybe I woke up Ludius, I'm sorry, father." Find Shuyuan www.jiaoshuyuan.com. Paul had already become accustomed to Roya's expression. He looked at the plain expression and shook his head helplessly. He said, "You kid, learn to laugh more." Roya thought for a moment and forced out an ugly smile. Paul covered his face and said, "You should just do this, it's hard for you. It has been 2 years since the accident occurred." Ludius already knew the fact that the pale and tender face in front of him was his big brother. It's just that there seems to be something wrong with this big brother. Whenever he tries to do something rustling with the excuse of being young, he is always stared at by that indifferent gaze. Then Roya would speak coldly, "Ludius, boys who do such things will be considered abnormal." Then his paw, which was grabbing towards his underwear, would hover in mid-air. He wanted to pretend to be a baby and show a naive smile in an attempt to get by. Unfortunately, Big Brother didn't accept this trick and picked him up directly, bouncing him lightly or heavily on his forehead. Grasping his collar again, he rudely threw him onto the bed. Then he said in a very strict tone, "You're not allowed to look at others' privacy with such lascivious eyes. Do you want to become Paul?" Ludius really wanted to say that he really wanted to become Paul, but in the face of that serious face, he ultimately lowered his head in shame. After glancing at Ludius, who was feeling gloomy, Roya continued, "We want to be fair and square with Cecil." Ludius, who lowered his head, suddenly looked up. His head was full of question marks, and he looked at Roya, who was serious. He wanted to say whether you wanted to hear what you were saying. Anyway, stealing fat is not right, you know. Ludius. Serious face. JPG. Chapter 7. The God of Roa. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, my name is Ludius. I have been in this world for 2 years now. I'm not doing well here. I can do many things that I used to want to do but couldn't do with my identity as a baby. But that damn Zhengtai, oh no, the damn little ghost has repeatedly stopped me. Today, I want to let him know the cost of humiliating my grandfather. So, with this feeling in his heart, he tiptoed closer to Roya's room. The door didn't close, and he quietly pushed it open without making any sound. So, he suddenly burst into the room and saw a scene that shook him. That pretty little, fair and delicate finger held a dagger, which was pitch black all over, wrapped in countless pitch black threads. When he pushed the door in, Roya looked coldly at the little yellow-haired ghost in front of him. The magic blade on the finger rotated in a beautiful position like a butterfly knife, leaving jet black marks in the air. Very handsome. Ludius was stunned and lost in thought. However, a gaze without any emotion turned towards him. Ludius, didn't you know you had to knock on the door? Roya's voice was calm and elegant, although immature, it had a faint majesty. Ludius waved his chubby little hand, trying to explain something. After gazing at the clear eyes, he inexplicably lowered his head and said, "I'm sorry." A sigh came, and Roya continued, "Don't do this next time." He waved his hand and gestured for Ludius to get out. However, Ludius was very curious about the scene just now. He asked Roya, "Brother Roya, did you just cast magic?" Roya nodded coldly. Ludius asked curiously, "What kind of magic is that? Why don't you sing it?" Since Ludius became aware of the existence of extraordinary powers in this world at the age of 1, he has been studying magic and exercising it. He has now reached a level where he can barely cast intermediate-level magic, and he has also developed his own set of skills to cast magic without singing. Roya's mouth curved upwards, and in Ludius's eyes, he was sneering, but Roya joked, "Who told you that performing magic requires singing?" Ludius was taken aback and stuttered, "But aren't all the books written about singing a very, very long line?" Roya glanced at him and said, "Magic is not such an inconvenient thing. You really take the words of those useless wizards in the book seriously. They can't handle it on their own, can't you think of a way? Just listen, don't take it seriously." Ludius fell silent and looked at his 4-year-old, pink older brother in front of him. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. His self-esteem was shattered. He thought he had a strong talent after reincarnation, but he didn't expect his brother to appear even more demonic. After feeling dejected for a moment, I heard Roya continue to explain, "This is the spell I developed, I call it the magic sword." Ludius's eyes lit up and he cautiously asked, "So, can I learn?" Roya was not surprised by Ludius's secret touch to exercise his magic. After thinking for a moment, he thought to himself and said, "How is your control over magic?" "It's okay, isn't it? Can you condense the magic?" "Sure," Ludius nodded. Roya said again, "Don't turn it into various elements of wind, fire, water, and soil. Magic is magic. You just keep compressing it and trying to condense it." Ludius frowned and soon turned pale, sighing slightly, "No, the magic is not enough. The amount required for this spell is too large, isn't it?" Roya waved her hand and sighed, "It looks like you can't do it." The words "no" were transformed into a sharp sword and pierced into Ludius' chest. In an instant, Ludius blushed and looked at the indifferent little Zhengtai in front of him. Although his face remained expressionless, he had reason to believe that this guy was deliberately teasing him. After looking at the bright weather outside, the unique high temperatures emanating from summer, and the white clouds constantly flipping in the blue sky, Roya thought for a moment and said, "Let's go out." Upon hearing these two words, Ludius instinctively trembled all over. He wanted to refuse, but before he could speak, he heard Roya's cold voice. Of course, this is an order, not an inquiry. Ludius showed an ugly smile and looked at Roya, saying, why go out? The weather is so hot outside and the house is so cool, why go out and sunbathe? Roya didn't speak and just looked at him like that. Ludius swallowed his saliva and met the gaze of death, but the words he said when going out together never spoke. In the end, he was forcibly dragged out and said to Lilia, I'm out now, leading Ludius out with a sorrowful expression. The world outside is actually very beautiful. Today's temperature is not too hot. The gentle breeze from Zaishuan calm brought a hint of coolness to the two of them. As they walked out, there was golden rice and wheat. The farmers were farming, and children of the same age were playing. Ludius looked around with a hint of fear. Even if it's 2 years apart, it can't heal his inner trauma. He's already a timid person. The next moment, a warm hand held Ludius' little hand, and Ludius was stunned. He looked up in panic and saw a faint smile hanging from the corner of Loya's mouth. Like the sunshine in spring, like the gentle breeze in autumn, the smile is light but very beautiful. The dazzling sunlight shone on his golden hair, and his dazzling golden long hair drifted with the breeze. His eyes were always so calm as a clear spring. I don't know why, Ludius is a bit obsessed. Roya walked to the golden rice ear with this house, and he whispered, stretch out your hand. Ludius reached out and Roya raised his hand to the side of the rice ear. The golden rice ear fluttered in the wind, and the full particles on it were so dazzling. Ludius gently brushed his fingers over the golden rice ear, and a tickling sensation came from his hand. He saw a small insect climbing on the rice ear, and he felt a bit dazed. He was a bit confused. Ludius and Roya's eyes met, clear and bright, as if they could penetrate human hearts. However, at one glance, Ludius felt that everything on his body was being seen through by these eyes. Roya spoke slowly and said, although I don't know what you're afraid of, life only comes once. Your health, your mission, and the people you love are the most important. Ludius stared at him in a daze, his beautiful face illuminated so wholly by the dim yellow light. At this moment, Ludius listed his elder brother in front of him as his god. Loki's throne has been occupied by Roya. Chapter 8. Luo Qixi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, another 2 years have passed, and Roya has successfully found a wife for Ludius, which is Sylphie. After bringing a somewhat shy Sylphie to the house and letting Ludius start his own development plan, Roya said in her heart, you already have one, you can't be fooled. So besides his usual exercises in magic and swordsmanship, he was calculating time. What is calculating time for? Of course, it's waiting for Loki. Ludius has a wife now, so it's not unreasonable for himself, as the eldest brother, to have a wife too, right? At the age of 4, Loya began making demands to the Paul couple with appropriate reasons. Father and mother, I think Ludi and I need a magic teacher to teach us, said Roya. So soon, a young girl with blue hair got off the carriage. My name is Luo Qixi, please give me more advice. She half squinted her eyes and spoke to Paul, feeling tired. Lowly, half squinted with anger, with a cold attitude. This is the impression she gives to everyone. At the moment of seeing Loki, Loya almost couldn't help but pull Ludius aside. Roya said with a serious face, Ludius, am I good to you? Ludius felt inexplicably strange, but still nodded. To be honest, although the big brother in front of him had a cold expression, he was actually a very good person. Roya leaned over to Ludius and said, I have a crush on this girl. Ludius's eyes suddenly widened, he glanced at the somewhat cute Loki, and then at the extremely beautiful little Jing Tai in front of him. The thought of them starting to paste made his cheeks turn red, and he almost instantly thought of a dozen or so G notebooks. As if afraid that Ludius might not hear clearly, Roya repeated, I have a crush on this girl. Ludius nodded, showing a clear expression. He leaned into Roya's ear and said, what do you want to do? What should we do? Roya gave Ludius a strange glance and said, what else can we do? Ludius chuckled, and the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a lewd smile. Roya couldn't help but take 2 steps back, and Ludius whispered, of course it's that one. Such a lovely girl, don't tell me you have no idea. Roya was lost in thought and nodded. Ludius patted the shoulder of the big brother in front of him and glanced at Shalufi inside the room. Ludius shouted, Shalufi, you can also come out and listen. Paul was very unhappy with the 2 guys whispering next to him and shouted loudly, Roa, Ludius, come over and pay your respects to your master. Luo Qixi looked at the 2 of them with some curiosity. She slightly supported the brim of her hat and said to Paul, I heard that there are 2 boys here who want to learn magic. Which one? With Loki's ghostly expression on his face, Paul reached out and pointed to the tall Zhengtai next to him, saying, this is my eldest son, his name is Roya. Then he pointed to a yellow-haired little ghost next to him and said, this is my second son, named Ludius. Roya had become accustomed to it and bowed, saying, are you my master? When we first met, my name is Roa Graylat, and you can call me Roa. Luo Qixi was taken aback by the cute little Zhengtai in front of her, who was carved with pink jade. She pointed to the little Zhengtai in front of her again and said, you, man. Roya's eyebrows twitched as he knew that his current appearance would cause many misunderstandings. Who made him look like this? Roya nodded, and Loki smiled awkwardly, just glancing back and forth from Roya and Ludius. So, are they both going to learn magic? Asked Loki. Ludius weakly raised his hand and said, if possible, I would like Sylphie to receive your guidance as well. Hey am I. It would be great if I could be with Ludi and brother Roya, and also learn magic together. Isn't that a bit bad? Hilfi asked with some hesitation. Ludius just smiled brightly at the latter, waving his hand with a look wrapped around me. Paul covered his forehead with his hand and said irritably, I said, don't make decisions on your own, you 2 are the only ones who were originally agreed upon. Luo Qixi's smile was a bit stiff. She looked at the somewhat submissive Shalufi next to her and sighed, you can stay and listen, but are all 3 of you too young? 1 is 6 years old, and 2 is 4 years old. Ludius and Hilfi's original smiles suddenly froze. Paul, on the other hand, proudly stood up and said, all the boys in our family are geniuses. Zhaoshuyuan.com. As if sighing helplessly, Luo Qixi had no choice. She rubbed her eyebrows and said in a relaxed voice, so, let's start today's first class. So the 4 of them found an open space in the courtyard and sat down. Luo Qixi took out a heavy magic book from her handbag, thought for a moment, and put it down. She said to the 3 children sitting cross-legged in front of her, so, let's use this magic textbook. No, before that, let's confirm how much magic you can use. Ludius was about to speak but was interrupted by Roya's cold voice. Roya said, we just learned some relevant knowledge from books. Luo Qixi's delicate face showed a certain expression, and she sighed slightly. She looked around and said to the crowd, let me demonstrate first. Let's see if you can try to learn. May the great protection of water come to where you are seeking, and the cool shallow flow manifest here. Water ball. A fist-sized water ball began to gather in her hand, and the water ball began to circulate before flying towards the distance. Pa-ji. The sound of a water ball landing sounded, landing next to the railing and wetting it. Did you see it? Luo Qixi's expression was somewhat listless, indicating that her expectations for the 3 of them were not high. It's so impressive. Ludius's slightly exaggerated voice came, and he frowned and winked at Roya at this moment. Zalufii was a bit puzzled. Didn't they both know this thing a long time ago? Magic is very magical. There is no doubt that various elements of wind, fire, water, and soil can be created out of thin air. But magic is also extremely difficult to learn because it has strict requirements for magic. Today, Loki encountered 3 top demons. Chapter 9. I want to stick with Luo Qixi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Under her stunned gaze, almost everyone once unleashed the magic of water polo. Luo Qixi fell into silence, while Luo Qixi was lost in thought. Luo Qixi was hit. With a sigh, the helplessness on her small face turned into a bitter smile. She couldn't imagine that all 3 of the family were geniuses. Intermediate magic, do you know it? Asked Loki. This time, Luo Yidao did not hide any secrets. He nodded and said, the book only describes intermediate magic, and no matter how advanced it is, it will be gone. Is that so? Luo Qixi breathed a sigh of relief inexplicably, secretly cheering for herself in her heart. At the same time, she said in an old-fashioned tone, actually, it's not a big deal to release intermediate magic at your age, especially you, Roya. Don't be proud of it. Then Loki gradually explained the precautions for advanced magic, and it has to be said that Loki is a very good lecturer, her words are always easy to understand. The morning time passed, and Hilfi stayed at Paul's house to finish her meal before going home, while Roya and Ludius were asked by Paul to practice swordsmanship. A man must have a sword in his heart to protect important people, his original words were like this. Due to the length of the original sentence, Roya only remembered these 2 sentences. The formal swordsmanship exercise will begin in the afternoon. Basically, it focuses on sword swinging and practicing standardized movements. For example, take the wooden dummy set in the yard as the opponent to confirm the standard action and attack situation, or playing against Paul, training in footwork and center of gravity, and so on, that's the feeling. In this world, swordsmanship is highly valued. Starting from the basics, it's really good. Heroes in this world all use swords and occasionally use axes or hammers, but they are only a minority. No one uses a long spear, this is because the annoying Spalud tribe uses a 3-pronged gun. So the spear is a demon's weapon, this is common sense. There have also been several such demons in the book, playing the role of murderers who bite to death regardless of whether they are enemies or us. Perhaps due to this background, the swordsmanship here is better than in the world we used to be in. If one can become a master, they may even be able to cut rocks with one sword or unleash sword energy to attack opponents in the distance. In fact, Paul was able to split the rock in half with one sword. Due to Roya's desire to know the principle, he actually performed several times through flattery, praise, and praise. Paul should be in a good mood when he sees his son, who can use higher-level magic at a young age, clapping happily for himself. However, no matter how many times I watched, I still couldn't understand the principle. Roya asked Paul to explain, and he said, it feels like humming forward and then chopping down. Paul is a terrible teacher. Although he has strong swordsmanship, he is really not a good teacher. However, according to his own practice, he really frowned a bit. Every time he swings his sword, there is always an inexplicable intuition telling him how to swing the sword most conveniently, how to draw the sword most appropriately, and how to collect the sword most securely. Just like dividing a line segment into 2 parts, Roya can almost intuitively draw the point of the golden ratio. Every time Luoya wielded his sword, he could hit the opponent's soft rib perfectly, and with the increase of sword swings, this intuition was almost engraved in his bones. Roya was a bit puzzled and asked Paul, I don't know why, there's always an intuition telling me how to make a sword. On this day, Paul remained silent for a long time, with tears in his eyes. He explained, your swordsmanship talent is surprisingly high. Fortunately, there was also a Ludius. Ludius had talent, but not so much evil, which finally made Paul breathe a sigh of relief. A son who is too excellent will make the father feel quite embarrassed. In this world, there are 3 main schools of swordsmanship. The first type is sword god flow, which emphasizes aggression and advocates preemptive action, with speed as an important means. Attack is the best defense, which is the core concept of Sword God Flow. If you are unable to kill your opponent with just one strike, Sword God Flow will adopt a strategy of hitting and running until you win. This genre is similar to the Samoan manifestation in reality. The second type is the Water God Flow, which is completely opposite to the Sword God Flow. This genre focuses on defense, with the core of evading attacks and counterattacks. Due to its focus on defense, Shu Shenliu rarely takes the initiative to attack. However, experts can counterattack all attacks, including magic and ranged weapons. This genre is usually studied by court knights and nobles. The third type is Bei Shenliu, which is more like military tactics than swordsmanship. There are no specific moves, but different strategies are adopted according to different situations. Paul said it was a last-minute response, but in reality, practitioners of Bei Shenliu often use small movements and cleverness to win. However, as long as it can reach a high level, Bei Shenliu can achieve remarkable victories. This genre is very suitable for those who have injuries or defects on their bodies, as they can still continue to fight. Therefore, Bei Shenliu is very popular among mercenaries and adventurers. In short, these three swordsmanship genres each have their own characteristics, applicable situations, and advantages. Paul's strength is very strong, and his talent is beyond doubt. His Water God Flow, North God Flow, and Sword God Flow are all superior swordsmen. Don't think that the superior swordsmen are weak. In fact, apart from the Sword King and Sword God, the level of the superior swordsman is really not bad. Swordsmanship is not equivalent to magic, and can only be improved through accumulated practice over time. Time passed quickly, and after the two finished practicing swordsmanship, the sun had already set and night had begun to fall. Today is not only the day when Loki arrives, but also the day when the power of time and space gathers together. The power of time and space 100 out of 100 currently, one star of small worlds can be captured. Do you want to capture them? At night, Paul and Senis prepared a sumptuous dinner. Roast chicken steaming hot, flickering with tempting colors under the illumination of oil lamps, crispy and delicious bread, hot soup made from unknown vegetables, and small dishes placed on the table, filling the entire hall with fragrance and heat. It smells so good. Luo Qixi stared greedily at the food in front of her, which was almost the best food she had eaten in the past year. So everyone began to use their chopsticks, and Roas chewed the chicken in a gentle manner. The silky and delicious chicken filled his entire mouth, and he swallowed it with oil. Surprisingly good. However, it seems that we don't have any extra rooms at home, Paul suddenly said, as if thinking of something. Indeed, Roya and Ludius have always slept separately, and this house is actually not large, and the room can accommodate only a limited number of people. Upon hearing this, Roya's eyes lit up and he silently gave Ludius a glance. Ludius blinked and the hand that was picking up the rice gave a meaningful glance at Roya. Chapter 10. Sword and Sword Divine Domain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, is it really okay for a 6-year-old child to sleep in the same room as Loki? He rose in the bottom of his heart and laughed at his eldest brother, the toad, who wanted to eat swan meat. He could see that his eldest brother had been scheming for a long time. Indeed, he had the same blood with him. Under Roya's stern gaze, Ludius had to speak up and said, "Why don't we share a room with Loki? My room is messy and relatively small. If it's Big Brother's room, it seems like there's no problem with accommodating two people in daily life." Paul hesitated for a moment and said somewhat awkwardly, "But after all, your older brother is a boy and sleeping with a girl doesn't feel good." Ludius continued to smooth things out and said, "Big Brother is only 6 years old. Miss Loki can definitely treat him like her younger brother." Paul looked at Roya, who had a calm and carefree face. His delicate doll-like face made Paul inexplicably feel that there was no problem. At this moment, Roya also spoke appropriately and said, "Since my younger brother doesn't want to be with the master, I think I can accept the master." Ludius was somewhat stunned. He looked incredulously at the light-hearted oni sauce and cursed the person in front of him for their shamelessness, even throwing the blame at him. A childish voice, unable to distinguish between male and female voices, with a highly deceptive appearance and a cold attitude. Although Paul noticed something was amiss, he didn't feel anything wrong at all. After pondering for a moment, he turned his gaze to Luo Qixi, who was excitedly grabbing rice. It was evident that she had been hungry for a long time. "Well, Loki, can you live with Roya?" Paul asked Loki. Luo Qixi glanced at Pink Shengtai with a spare moment, and her mind was completely focused on the food in front of her. Without thinking, she agreed, "No problem." Upon hearing these words, Roya's mouth curved upwards, revealing a shallow smile. At this moment, he was laughing wildly in his heart. It wasn't until Loki finished her meal and was ready to go to her room to rest that she realized. She grabbed Roya's sleeve and said incredulously, "I'll sleep with you." Roya nodded with a calm expression. Glancing at Luo Qixi's slightly flushed face, he felt that he should explain himself. He slowly spoke up and said, "Well, my room is actually quite large." Luo Qixi looked at the tender moment before her, and finally sighed and accepted this bleak fact. Carrying her luggage upstairs and entering Roya's room inexplicably caught her eye. As Roya said, his room was actually very large. If the room was surprisingly clean, it would have a wooden table against the wall, with chairs next to it, and neatly arranged books on the table. I roughly glanced around, mostly books related to magic knowledge and some introductions to the world background. The floor is very clean and smooth, as you can see, the owner often cleans this place, and the bedding is neatly stacked. The whole room still emitted a faint fragrance, and upon closer inspection, one would notice that the aroma of the room was exactly the same as the scent of Roya in front of them. The word, body fragrance, inexplicably flashed through Luo Qixi's mind. "Master, you must be very tired. You've been tired all the way, so you can go rest first." Roya spoke in a childish voice. "Not to mention, it's a bit drowsy." Luo Qixi arranged the things and couldn't help but yawn. Roya, on the other hand, sat on a chair, seemingly holding a book, but in reality, he was contemplating capturing the world. The dim candlelight shines on Luoya's young and lovely face. His smooth blonde hair reaches to his waist. His golden eyes are pure and flawless, just like topaz. His face is serious, solemn and meticulous. It seems that this boy has been like this since the beginning, always feeling different from other children. He always seems to have a calm and reliable appearance. Loki thought about this idea in her mind. She began to take off her magician-style jacket, and as she took off her clothes, the remaining light silently scrutinized Roya. If he dared to peek, she would definitely apply for a new room. Unfortunately, the child in front of me seems to be reading seriously and has no intention of being moved by external objects. Luo Qixi sighed, feeling both happy and a little sad. She actually wanted to say, "Does her charm have nothing at all?" What Luo Qixi didn't know was that Luoya was looking at the system functions with a curious expression at the moment. Searched for 1-star world. Sword God domain, the ratio of 1-star world to current world time is 4.1, successful world coordinate positioning, please choose the method you want to enter. 1. Clone traversal, 2. Real body traversal, note 1. When a clone crosses death, the soul will only be traumatized, while when a real body crosses death, it is true death. Note 2. After completing the world crossing settlement, the clone can only obtain a portion of the current world experience, assignable, note 3. Please participate in the plot as much as possible to gain a lot of time and space power and prepare for the next time travel, note 4. Check if your small world is in a damaged state, you may need a lot of origin power. Roya pondered that there are 2 ways to travel. One is to divide one's soul into parts, transform it into a clone, and place it in that world. The advantage is that reality and traveling through the world can be repeated, but the disadvantage is also obvious. You can't get all the rewards from zhaozuiyuan.com, so you can only choose a part of it. If you travel through real life, you can only choose between two options. After pondering for a while, the world of Sword and Sword God domain can be considered a low martial world, and can only be considered average. It's not worth passing through with your true body. So, let's split up and travel. He clicked on the clone traversal. Then 3 options popped up. You can choose one of the following 3 identities to invade a 1-star world. Identity selection will slightly affect talents, swordsmanship apprentice. Slightly increases talent, fool, special. Fools embark on a journey of life full of innocence, simplicity, and no fear. Note 1. Choosing this talent will change your personality. You will gain the following states: innocence, arrogance, stubbornness, and instability. Note 2. If you successfully pass the level with this talent, you can obtain a higher level of Fool's talent for mining. Student. Slightly improving learning talent, Fools. Roya frowned again. To be honest, he never expected to see the talent of Fools again. But obviously, the talent of Fools is stronger than the other 2 talents. His current talent for Fools is only 1 level, but it is this level of talent that has already elevated his proficiency in magic. So, I choose Fool as a talent to enter the world. Roya's mind moved, and in the next moment, his perspective began to separate. His soul split in 2, and Roya could clearly feel another perspective, senses, and state of himself. Rather than being a clone, it's more like dividing oneself in half and doing it simultaneously. And that one exists as a fool. The time ratio was unexpectedly low, only 1.4.